Greetings. I want to try and give you a little help with this encyclopedia entry on spirit possession. Wanted to point out to you, first of all, that there is at the bottom of Doc Sharing an entry that is called Spirit Possession Entry. I didn't label that very well. That is Vincent Crapanzano's entry on spirit possession. His was in the original Encyclopedia of Religion, and then they asked me back in '02 or whenever it was to add a second entry, so women and spirit possession. So his is there. That gives you the he's a kind of psychologist guy, and he gives you a great overview of where spirit possession studies were, let's say, back 10, 15 years ago. And then mine's a little more recent. So then if you come up here, you're going to see Keller's Women and Spirit Possession Encyclopedia entry. So a person could actually get that wrong if you weren't aware that both of those are in there. And between the two of them, you'll have spirit possession covered. And who doesn't want to have that? All right, so let me try and cover what I do in that article. So, one, the transhistorical and cross-cultural context is that spirit possession is everywhere, and it's a very good show when it happens, which means that people have written about it and thought about it in all kinds of times and places. It exists on all continents and throughout most of Western history as well. Now, there's two reasons we have all this evidence across time and continents. One is the often spectacular nature of possession accounts, and two, spirit possession demands a witness or a community response. The possessed person is by definition not there to record it, right? And so its drama calls for the community, those members of the community who have authority, like priests and doctors and anthropologists. Those are the people who begin to write it down and try to make sense of it. So for those two reasons, we have a lot of evidence about it. And we find it in legal, medical, historical, literary, and theatrical texts. I can't tell you how many anthropologists begin their books on spirit possession by saying they never intended to study it, but it was so powerful they had to. Right? So that's part of the issue. This is a good show. People can't take their eyes off of it. People record it. And this has happened across time, across continents. Who knew? Who knew spirit possession was such a big thing? Oops, I'm starting my timer. So the entry begins by identifying a problem, and it proposes a solution. The problem is that many scholars have approached spirit possession as a symptom of people's weakness, backwardness, those kinds of things. So Susan Sered has called it the deprivation theory approach, right? That people are possessed as a result from social, physical, and mental deprivations. So if you read an analysis, you could read Crapanzano's entry in the encyclopedia and say, oh, is this a deprivation theory, right? Has he approached this as though every example is an example of somebody who is weak, vulnerable, somehow less needy than him, the guy who's writing about it. And I'm being a little cheeky, but that's kind of the power differential that gets set up sometimes, is that it makes it seem like the people studying it who are attracted by its power are somehow more stable than the very thing that has attracted their attention and brought them into their study. So what if we challenge this approach, questioning the assumption that deprivation theories employ? They assume what's normal and what's not, and so they provide an explanation about how the person is inferior. What if we flip this around a bit, approaching the study of spirit possession with a revaluation, right? So if you've got a value on something, what happens when you flip it over and think, what is its value now? What if we take the possessed person from his or her wild, exotic, irrational place, and face it, for most Americans living in 2013, they're going to think that this is wild, irrational, exotic stuff. But what if we try to take them from that place and start with that person as the center of normality? So if you do that, kind of as a mind challenge, um, there are three things that I'm going to expand on in here that happen when you revalue it. One, the cross-cultural and trans-historical prevalence of accounts of spirit possession presents a familiar rather than an exotic model of religious subjectivity. So for most human communities across the broadest spectrum of history, as we look at this, it's clear spirit possession happened in them, right? So it's not abnormal. It's happened for longer than it hasn't happened in our modern Western world. Two, that the capacity to be possessed by an ancestor, deity, or spirit is best approached, as Sarad and Boddy argue, as an ability, like a musical or athletic ability. So let me just riff on this. When you see a talented musician, do you think, poor kid, she must have weak social skills and an incapacity to relate to people like the rest of us? She has to play a flute. Probably you don't. When you see an athlete, do you think, oh, poor guy, he thinks football is for real? Probably not. Musicians and athletes have developed their capacity to experience peak flows in which the music or the sport plays through them. Now, what if the possessed person is approached similarly as a human who loses themselves to the peak experience? Now, what is different in the case of spirit possession is that the person being possessed normally, and we'll see this time after time, says, I didn't choose this. I wasn't gunning for that NFL salary, right? But they say this thing chose me. But you guys might also know musicians or athletes who know they can't do anything other than what they do, that the sport chose them or the music chose them. So those are the first two reasons. The third then is if we revalue it, we find out possession's not this exotic thing off on the spectrum of we're normal and that's there, but rather that, whoop, here we go, possession is actually the formal root of religious experience. So what do I mean by formal root? That the common element of a person on their knees praying, let's say Muslim, Jewish, Revival, Zion, etc., is the effort by that person to connect with and become receptive to a power that has the redemptive potential to help the human. So spirit possession is the formal root of religious subjectivity because it represents a human body that is representative to a will that is non-human, and the receptivity of the body to do the will of that superior power. So once you look at it that way, prayer, meditation, yoga, these are all efforts of humans in their bodies to connect with something and allow the power of that something to bring them to a better place. I'm going to check my time, so I'm going to stop this right now.